Dustin Dopirak with the Bloomington Herald-Times, and just got off with Don Fisher, Dustin, and as it was for him, for you as well, a busy last few days, man. Exciting but fun.
Oh, yeah, no, it was wild. I mean, did not expect to spend as much time in, well, I mean, obviously I live in Indianapolis, but did not expect to spend as much time at Gamebridge as we did. Ultimately, just a fascinating tournament in Indiana, which is, really, I think, the most interesting team in Indianapolis. I mean, the way they obviously stepped up, coming back from down 17 against Michigan, then just a whale of a back and forth basketball game against Illinois, and then another one against Iowa. Really thrilling basketball. And this team, I think, is a lot more exciting, a lot more interesting than it was a couple weeks ago. I mean, there's still obvious evident flaws with this group. Certainly the 3-point shooting still isn't what Indiana wants it to be, but I mean, they're defending really well. Galloway and Finney being back make this a different team. Xavier Johnson is playing just spectacular basketball, but also Trace Jackson Davis is playing like an All-American. Even though he's probably not going to be one this year as he was a year ago, he was just tremendous in Indy. And so just fascinating weekend. Obviously fascinating stuff going on yesterday, but definitely Indiana for sure made it interesting at Big Tens.
I told Don, I'm man, if Indiana can get past Iowa, I think that they win the daggone Big Ten tournament. Purdue's just not playing that well. Indiana was on a roll, and I think that the way that they were on a roll is in a manner that Purdue would not have been. Iowa was tougher because they have so many 3-point weapons, and Indiana just couldn't slow them down enough. Purdue doesn't have quite that, and I'm thinking they could have actually won that stinking tournament. And I didn't give it. I'll be honest with you. I gave them no chance to beat Michigan at the start of this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I gave them a chance. I thought they could. I mean, they needed to. I mean, just out of the sense of desperation, I think they had a shot. Just because of that, and there's some ways in which they match up okay, but there's a lot of ways in which they don't. Obviously, and you remember the previous game in Assembly Hall, they got their doors blown off. I mean, that was probably their worst. Just their worst performance of the season. But they managed to just defensively lock up. I mean, it is wild to consider. I mean, how well Michigan was shooting early, and the fact they missed 14 straight. And Indiana turns that game around. I mean, I think it was 31-9 down the stretch. I mean, I guess it was 24-9. I can't remember. Just all of the runs in that package there in the last 11 minutes. The extent to which they really stepped up. But they seem buried. I mean, they're down 17, and I'm just presuming, okay, well, NIT then, not going anywhere. And the next 11 minutes of that game, it's just different. They found a gear, they locked in. Johnson and Finney get rolling. It was something else.
Yeah, we were talking about Wyoming and the upcoming next. Let's see. Daryl says that they're a 3.5 or 4-point favorite. That surprises me. And I know nothing about Wyoming. I know zilch about Wyoming, but just quickly looking and the way Indiana's playing. But you get to this, it doesn't matter. The non-familiarity is sometimes a problem. Sometimes it's great because you're not playing a team you've already played, like if they'd had to have played Rutgers or Notre Dame. Sometimes it works to your advantage, I guess, especially for them on what they can. There's only so much they can scout for Indiana.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, obviously they can watch a lot of film, but like when you're used to league play, I mean, and especially, and I don't know if this is more true in the Big Ten than every place else. I mean, because obviously the game tends to slow down traditionally in the Big Ten, and part of the reason is because the coaches tend to scout so well. The tendencies are so well known over years and years and years, and sometimes the tendencies sort of continue through coaching staffs. Wisconsin obviously has been playing the same way. Or something similar, not just going back through the Bo Ryan era, but probably go back to Dick Bennett. I mean, it's not the exact same plays or anything like that, but I mean, they have sort of their grinded out style is continued through three coaches, and these teams just know what the other one's going to do, and that leads to this sort of like clutch and grab kind of games where it's like, okay, all of a sudden you get to play somebody else you haven't played that doesn't know you, and it's wide open, and it's just they're they're figuring out who your players are, in the span of 2 or 3 days, and you have some idea who can shoot and who can't and whatever, but you've got so much more data and so much more awareness, and you probably recruited the kid and that kind of stuff, where there's like crossover there, like trying to think of guys this fits for, but I mean, there's players that Purdue and Michigan State and Michigan and Indiana all recruited, and they go one place, and you figure out how to defend them because you knew what you wanted them to do in your system, and so flip that around, and there's probably going to be guys that like the guys in Wyoming, Indiana probably never considered recruiting, and vice versa, and they've never seen, and it's a totally it's not a totally different style of basketball, but obviously they're going to have a sense. Indiana, Wyoming's obviously going to know it's got to defend Trace Jackson Davis. It's going to have some sense of Xavier Johnson. But there's going to be a lot of things they don't know. It's going to be a more wide open floor, you have to presume. Again, just less grinded out. And so, it is a different game. That's why I think the tournament always ends up being so refreshing, because it's always a more open kind of scrambled game, because you don't have all this time to get ready. Sometimes you just play.
And as I look through this as well, if Indiana gets past Wyoming, which, speaking of which, I would think that there's probably going to be a large contingent of Indiana fans in Dayton, much more than there are going to be from Wyoming. That is for damn sure.
Yeah.
But that got me to thinking, if they win that game and go to Portland, they're playing St. Mary's. Where is St. Mary's from out there?
California. I think it's Southern California.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that's not as bad then. But West Coast, but then they play UCLA if they're able to get past that. So,
presumably, unless Akron pulls one off.
So
always
that's
open possibility.
But so put them in the West and put them against every Western team they could put them up against too, as well. So, yeah, I hate complaining about it, but man, it just seems like with the committee, or the NCAA located in Indianapolis, they almost go out of their way to not show any favoritism or perceived favoritism towards Indiana.
Right. I mean, well, not only that though. I mean, they're like, forget just Indiana. Like, it's like somebody buy them a globe. Honestly, this is absurd. I mean, it really is. I mean, like, just I don't care who's playing, whether it's Indiana, whether it's somebody else, like just wherever that team is from. Like, you don't send people to Dayton and then send them to Portland or San Diego. I mean, that's where the winner of Rutgers and Notre Dame is going. The winner of that game has to go to San Diego. Like, that's absurd. They've got to get on a plane that night. You're going to be the late game because you always make the at-large game. The at-large games in this first four, the late games, the primetime games, to get better draws. You put the 16s on early because nobody knows, so you put on a Rutgers, Notre Dame, and Indiana, Wyoming, who have more brand names, and you make them play the late game, and then you got to put them on a plane so that they're ready to go practice on Wednesday and play a game on Thursday in the West Coast. I mean, flip side for Notre Dame, they'll play Wednesday night. Rutgers or Notre Dame, whoever wins that game, will play Wednesday night, then get on a plane and have to play on Friday. And again, in between, have an open practice. While you're having open practice, but you're also going to find some place to have a closed practice, and you're going to have media responsibilities on some level. So that's what's up with those guys. And then we, the media, have to make these trips, and we're probably not going to even be there for Wednesday media availability in Portland. I don't know how on earth we'd fly that far out,
which they don't care about, and it costs. They don't. It's dumb.
Yeah.
They don't. It's like they don't think 2 steps ahead of themselves at all.
Yeah. I mean, like,
I
I understand it probably messes with the S curve in some way, but when you're getting down to the 11s and 12s on the S curve, I mean, I feel like you can make an adjustment. There's availability. There's a couple spots you couldn't put people because, obviously you've got 2 Big Ten teams in this first 4, so you couldn't send them out to Milwaukee for the 11s out there because you've got Purdue and Wisconsin as the 3s up there. So you can't send them there. And I think Pittsburgh, you couldn't send them either. There's a 12 available in the Pittsburgh sub region, but Illinois is there, so you can't send them there either. But you could have sent an 11 to Indy, where Michigan is. You could have sent Michigan out west, but send the winner of that Rutgers Notre Dame game to Indianapolis, and then you could have sent the winner of the 12 out to Buffalo to play UConn, and that's manageable. That's doable. That's not crazy. And so, like, again, I get it. These kids they'll be on private jets, and they're 20 years old, 19 years old, whatever. I mean, they can physically recover. But you're taking them out of class for even longer. And that still makes a difference on your body. And if you got an injury, I don't know how Jordan Geronimo is going to feel. Basically if he tries to play tomorrow, and then has to get on a cross country plane to Portland with with an injured knee. How's that going to go? So I don't know. I don't think this was thought out, and this is a big country. You have to spend many, many hours on a plane and many hours in airports if you're flying commercial to get out to this. And again, I understand we're not priority. They don't care about us, but it's a pain. It just is. And it's logistically absurd to send people, send teams, send staffs, send media, send, and put, any highfalutin fans who can make this trip in a position where you're going from Dayton to Portland in the span of a day.
Yeah. You think about it. Parents,
right.
That's just so much to throw together. And I think that, I don't know, the play-in game is great, but maybe they have to think of a different way of doing it.
I think you either have you got to go one or two ways. Either A, you move it out of Dayton and you have those teams play wherever they're going to be. Then send them to Portland today. And that's a pain in itself, and that's crazy. But if you're it's either you're married to the S curve or you're married to Dayton. You can't be married to both. You have to come up with one of those two. If you love the idea of the first four in Dayton so much, I get it. That's great. It's a fun place to watch a game. Obviously, Indiana was there for the first and second rounds back in 2013. Thoroughly enjoyed the venue and the whole bit. And so it's a really cool court for college basketball. It's really cool for this event in particular. So if you want them out there, that's cool. But then you got to keep them at least in the Eastern or Central time zones. You can't ship people out to the West Coast after Dayton. But if you're more married to the S curve, if it's more important to make sure these guys are playing exactly who it is that they're supposed to play, in your machinations with the S curve where everybody fits, then you send them there early. If you're not going to care at all about where that is, then you got to send them there early. It's just, you can't have both things.
And it's kind of ironic that Indiana has to start this tour back into the NCAA tournament at the home of their previous coach, Archie Miller. I've thought of the irony about that.
There is irony. First off, it's just interesting to me that they're playing in the two sites that they played in 2012 and 2013. They did first and second round in Portland in 2012 and first and second round in Dayton in 2013. So I've got a kick out of that. But yeah, no, it is funny. They're going back to Archie's spot. I don't know. I wonder if he sees the irony in that, but he probably just does not care one single bit because he's Archie. But that is intriguing as well.
Absolutely. And this is a totally different story. And Harris Jaffe, lacrosse. Have you seen this story? The Clemson player, Clemson lacrosse player who was collapsed, revived partly by, it keeps saying an Indiana player. And I'm like, Indiana doesn't have lacrosse. So I haven't been able to fresh the story out.
It might be it's probably a club situation. I'm just seeing Indiana lacrosse has a tweet up about it. There's an Indiana lacrosse site, so I'm presuming that's a club situation because it's obviously not varsity. Well,
he performed CPR on this Clemson player because he has
Harris Jaffe was the guy who did it, and John Holcomb was the Clemson player.
Right. The Indiana player had EMT training and was able to start that before, I guess, along with trainers. But they keep saying that already this is going to be an amazing story. that's pretty amazing. One of the players in the game is part of saving another player's life. That's crazy.
Yeah, no, that's totally amazing. That's incredible. I mean, like I cannot even imagine the drama in that situation. But I mean, who knows how the kid knew CPR or whatever? Maybe he just took a class, but just a remarkable thing for somebody to do.
Yeah. All right. But getting back to NCAA tournament, you've also got Purdue, who they're heading into this thing. They're kind of dragging a little bit. Illinois, they're okay probably. Losing to Indiana, but they didn't like it. But Indiana was on a roll.
Right.
Iowa, is Iowa just? I mean, it's easy to say they're the hottest team, but man, they are on a roll. But is that a team that you see can go far?
Yeah, I mean, I think Iowa's, the issue with Iowa is what it always is. I mean, they still can't really guard, and they're probably a better defensive team than they've been in recent years. Where are they at? 77th in Ken Palm efficiency, so that's probably better than they've been. Let me see here. Like a year ago, they were 75. Year before that, they were 97. So they're that's an issue is that you can score on them. I think obviously when you're talking about like 5 men, I mean, I like Chris Murray's game a lot when they put him in, but he's obviously a smaller guy, 4 or 5, because basically, he and Keegan are literally the same size, and that is a 4, basically as a stretch 4. But Trace Jackson Davis was able just to have his way with Philip Ravaka, and they brought some double teams, obviously, and caused him some issues later. But he still had 31. So you can get beat. They can get beat by those type of guys. I mean, their guards defensively are just okay, but I mean, Keegan Murray's great. I mean, just that kid
Should Keegan Murray? I vote. I'm gonna be honest with you, in whatever thing that I voted on the U.S. Basketball Writers Association, I voted for Keegan or for Johnny Davis as Player of the Year. I regret my vote now. I shouldn't say regret it. I really, really question if Keegan Murray was not the best player in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, I mean, there were great players in the Big Ten this year. I mean, there's a chance, like, I mean, the same way as last year. I mean, they'll have more All-Americans than just about anybody, and so I think you could make a case for both. I mean, I think some of it's recency bias because Iowa's coming off of winning the Big Ten tournament, and Wisconsin got Wisconsin obviously got a piece of it in the regular season. So I mean, I think that always ends up coloring how you vote for those. I mean, I know it does with me. I don't think I had any votes this year, but bottom line, like they are. What am I trying to say here exactly? Like you look at Wisconsin as a champion where you didn't look at Iowa as a champion, and now you look at Iowa as a champion. All of a sudden, it makes more sense to have Keegan Murray, where it sort of like splits the difference. If you have 2 guys that are really, really good, you pick the guy who won his team a championship. And so basically, when all those were due, Wisconsin was the champion. Now Wisconsin has had a share in the regular season, and Iowa's Big Ten tournament champion. So it gives more legitimacy to Murray's case. I mean, both of those guys are really good, man. I mean, like you saw just what Davis was able to do down the stretch against Indiana, when they were, I guess, down at Assembly Hall. I mean, he was just unbelievable. And you consider also like Murray came into this year. Nobody really heard of him last year, and he got himself on the map toward the end of the year. And I mean, he was even being talked about as a first-round pick, going into the season, even though he didn't have like huge numbers last year. Johnny Davis. I mean, do we even know who Johnny Davis was? And Wisconsin was picked what, 9th, 10th, something like that.
Yes,
in the league, and they had some departures and everything like that. And you were looking at Wisconsin as a team like this will finally be the year that Wisconsin doesn't get a share of it, and Wisconsin finds a way to get a share of it. And as much as like everybody finds them annoying, as just Wisconsin, just the way they play, the style, the occasional, I don't know, extracurriculars, if you will. Davis carried them to a share of a Big Ten title. So I don't think you can regret picking Davis, but Murray made a case. Murray absolutely made a case. And, I mean, like, and you tack on the fact, I mean, Jaden Ivey is still friggin' phenomenal. And he probably wasn't really up for Big Ten Player of the Year just because there were so many other offensive weapons on Purdue, and he didn't have to take over the same way that Murray and Davis did for their teams. But, I mean, I still think, he's still the best NBA prospect out of the group. And those probably all three of those guys will be lottery picks. I mean, wow. Wow.
Rogers says playing physically may hurt IU because of the refs calling the game more closely. That's something I thought about the Big Ten tournament this weekend. They let them play. I mean, I know Indiana fans like to complain a lot of calls, but let me tell you, there's a lot of stuff that does not get called. I mean, they play physically, right. And if you're not game, you really can't see a lot of everything that's going on. Trust me, they are physical. And yeah, I wonder about that because we've seen that in the past, whether with other Big Ten teams, where they get into trouble in the NCAA because it's called a little closer, a lot more closer, and these teams are used to banging on each other.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, like because there's so much happening in the Big Ten games, some stuff gets let go, and so and it ends up being tough to call it consistently when it's like, well, you just let this go. Why did you let that go? And so it's like, okay, well, that was clear. So and you end up calling less just because you could call it all the time and just turn it into, nothing but a foul frenzy sometimes. And so, again, when they do go play, and they do call it a little bit tighter in NCAA games, it can absolutely be an issue. And this team gets shook up when it comes to foul trouble. Mike Woodson is pretty much a firm believer in the idea that you take a guy out if he's got 2 fouls in the first half. He's been sort of hard and fast on that, even when it's been a little bit questionable, especially the way Xavier Johnson's been playing lately. I mean, they've still pulled him for 2. They've still pulled him, for 2 fouls, even when he's playing really well and was clearly sort of the guy stirring the drink. He's been willing to pull him. So if guys like Johnson or Jackson Davis or Race Thompson or somebody like that get 2 fouls early, it shakes it up pretty good.
And then let's see what else is I going to say. Yeah, all right. Indiana was one of the last 2 teams in. They could have been the last team in for all. I'm going to assume that they were the second to last team in since they beat Notre Dame head to head. Notre Dame's the other. How in the world does a team that is 36 in the KenPom, 38 in the net rankings, that plays in the conference that has the most teams in the tournament, how in the world are they a freaking play-in team? I just don't get that. Nothing says that they're a play-in team other than some games they lost early that they just really shouldn't have. But man, I don't know that you punish the team that badly for that.
Well, there's a couple. I mean, it's one of those things. Once you get down to this stretch, once you get down to those last teams, and it really the last 8, all of them are flawed. They're going to be flawed. And if one thing catches your eye as a problem, you can make it a bigger problem. Like in your mind or in the mind of a committee, you can beat some teams up on some other things and raise some teams up on others, and say, basically I was sitting and talking to, I think Brian Tinsani, who's the guy who, has Delphi bracketology, just has that class up at Delphi High School where they do this. And we were talking about it after they beat Michigan, before they beat Illinois. And, this was when we were still talking about like whether they were going to get in at all or not. And it was like, basically like you can make a case if you want to get Indiana in, if you want to make an argument that Indiana deserves to be in, you can make it. And if you want to make an argument that Indiana does not deserve to be in, then you can make it. And obviously they beat Illinois and that improves their case. But, got put in the last 4. And so what are the arguments against? First off, 3-8 road record, which includes losses to Northwestern and Penn State. And, the suspensions thing, I mean, like, it's not like the fact that they, darn near gave away the Northwestern game by just deciding to go out, whatever happened Monday night that led to what apparently was a curfew violation. They don't look at that and say, well, they would have beat them by 20 if they had all their guys. They look at him and say, well, you guys screwed up. Like you guys decided it was more important to do whatever it was that you did, that you play that game. You get hurt by that. You get hurt by just not being able to beat a Penn State at their place. And again, 3-8 road record with the only 3 wins being Nebraska, Maryland, and Minnesota. Those are not great teams. Those were teams that were bottom 4, bottom 5, I guess, in the league. So you don't have an even decent looking true road win. You have the neutral win against Notre Dame is nice, but that's the best that you got. You lost to Syracuse on the road. That's not a tournament team. Again, obviously that's a tough place to play. Tough game, was wild, crazy, fun basketball game to watch, but Syracuse was not in the discussion, and you lost to them on the road. But then non-conference strength of schedule. Again, we've talked about it before, since Mike Woodson was very clear and upfront about why he didn't do any harder this year. Said, hey, this is my first year. It's a new team. I don't know these guys. I have no idea how much I can test them, so I won't. I just won't test them. I'm going to, spend November and December figuring them out. I figure we got enough of these contracted games with the Gavitt games and the ACC Big Ten Challenge and Crossroads. We'll get enough. And his, schedule is ranked 308th in the NET, non-conference strength of schedule. And the NCAA the committee seems to make a point of punishing that. Both really the playoff committee does too in football and in basketball. It's like, hey, you're like, you should play people. You have control over your non-conference schedule. You get to decide who you play, and you should challenge yourself if you expect to be a tournament team. Woodson obviously made the calculation, hey, if we take our time getting it together, then we'll get enough in the Big Ten that won't be a problem. Comes back to bite him again. I understood the logic from the beginning. I get where he was coming from, but the NCAA seems to hit you over the head with that. And 308th, that's bottom of the barrel. Obviously, they had a great league, but they were still 9-11 in it, and they don't help themselves with non-conference play. So, but you were really riding on the Big Ten. That's you really look at their argument. It is the Big Ten's great, and we did okay.